If they find me behind this curtain, I'm finished. Emily Carter pressed one trembling hand over her mouth as footsteps crossed the marble floor less than 20 feet away. The velvet curtain against her cheek smelled faintly of cedar smoke and old perfume, thick enough to hide her gray servant's dress, but not thick enough to silence her breathing. Somewhere beyond the fabric, the palace orchestra continued playing as though nothing had happened. Violins drifted through Blackthorn Palace, elegant and distant, while Emily counted every heartbeat hammering against her ribs. 1, 2, 3. Don't breathe so loudly. Don't move. Don't let them hear you. A dark red stain marked 2 of her fingertips, left there when she had reached for the object she should never have touched. She rubbed her fingers against her skirt, but the color remained. 6 hours earlier, she had been invisible. Now armed palace guards were searching for her. Check the West Gallery. Lord Marcus Whitmore ordered somewhere outside the curtain. His voice was calm, which frightened Emily more than shouting would have. She cannot have gone far. Boots separated across the ballroom. Emily closed her eyes. She could still see the room she had escaped from, still hear the whispered conversation that had turned an ordinary night of serving nobles into something she did not understand. She had seen enough to know someone inside this palace was planning something terrible. Worse, someone knew she had seen it. A guard stopped close enough that Emily could hear leather creak as he turned. "My lord, what exactly are we looking for?" "A servant." Marcus paused. "Young, brown hair, gray dress." Emily's stomach tightened. "An Omega?" the guard asked. Marcus gave a quiet laugh. "Does it matter?" It shouldn't have hurt. Emily had heard worse. In Blackthorn Palace, an Omega servant was useful precisely because no one important remembered her face. She carried trays, changed linens, lowered her eyes when nobles passed. She had spent years learning how to disappear before anyone could decide her presence was inconvenient. Tonight, invisibility had failed her. The footsteps came closer. 10 feet. 8. 5. Emily looked down and saw the toes of polished black boots beneath the curtain. Her lungs locked. A hand reached toward the velvet. Then every sound in the ballroom stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Emily heard dozens of people shift at once, followed by the unmistakable silence of an entire court remembering who ruled it. Another set of footsteps entered the room. Slow, heavy, unhurried. Emily knew that walk, although she had never stood this close to the man it belonged to. King Alexander Blackwood, the Alpha King. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you believe that kindness is power, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us, love redeems the broken. Now back to Emily. She stared through the narrow gap between the curtains. A tall figure in black crossed the marble floor, broad shoulders framed by the silver embroidery of the royal coat. Alexander did not hurry. He never needed to. People moved before he reached them. Lord Marcus bowed. "Your Majesty." Alexander said nothing. His silver-gray eyes traveled across the ballroom once, taking in the guards, the abandoned tables, the open doors. Then they settled on the curtain. On her curtain, Emily's blood went cold. He knew. Somehow he knew. Alexander walked directly toward her hiding place. Marcus straightened. "We are handling a minor security matter, Your Majesty." Still no answer. Alexander stopped inches from the velvet. Emily could see only his boots now. Black leather, silver buckles, motionless. If he pulled the curtain aside, there would be nowhere left to run. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. The fabric shifted. She expected light to flood over her. Instead, Alexander stepped closer, placing his body between the curtain and everyone in the ballroom. His hand rested casually against the velvet, shielding the narrow opening through which she might have been seen. For one impossible second, Emily forgot to breathe. Then the most feared man in the Northern Territories tilted his head slightly toward the hidden Omega behind him. His voice was so quiet that only she could hear it. "Don't move." 6 hours earlier, Emily Carter had been worried about nothing more dangerous than a wrinkle in a tablecloth. She stood near the eastern wall of the royal ballroom with a stack of folded linens balanced against her chest, watching servants transform the enormous hall for the evening gathering. Crystal chandeliers burned overhead, scattering warm light across polished marble and tall windows overlooking the Blackthorn Gardens. Outside, October wind moved through the trees. Inside, everything smelled of beeswax, cedar smoke, fresh roses, and expensive perfume. Emily preferred the edges of rooms like this. The edges were safe. At 22, she had spent 3 years working inside Blackthorn Palace, long enough to understand that servants survive by becoming part of the furniture. Carry what was needed. Speak when spoken to. Keep your eyes lowered around visiting alphas. Never give powerful people a reason to remember your name. For an Omega, those rules mattered even more. Emily had learned them quickly. Her brown hair was always pinned neatly behind her head, her gray uniform always clean, her footsteps always quiet. Most nobles passed her without looking twice. She considered that a talent. You missed a crease. The voice came from behind her. Emily turned and found Lady Victoria Ashford examining the banquet table. Victoria wore an ivory gown embroidered with tiny silver leaves, and several young nobles followed her as though they belonged to her shadow. Emily looked at the cloth. I apologize, my lady. I will fix it. She set down the linens and smoothed the fabric. There was barely a crease at all. Not there. Victoria pointed toward the chair at the head of the table. The future Luna's ceremonial chair. Emily hesitated. Servants had been instructed not to touch it after sunset. The steward told us the chair was already prepared. Victoria's smile became almost pleasant. Are you correcting me? Emily felt the room change around her. Conversations nearby softened. People were listening. No, my lady. She stepped toward the chair and adjusted the cloth beside it without touching the carved silver arms. Someone laughed quietly. Victoria lifted a glass of red wine from a passing tray. You Omegas are always so nervous. Her hand tilted. Wine spilled across Emily's sleeve and down the front of her gray dress. A few startled laughs followed. Emily froze. The wine was cold against her skin. Oh, Victoria said lightly. How clumsy of you. Emily knew better than to answer. She lowered her head and reached for a cloth. Another laugh came from the table. Then another. Her cheeks burned, but her hands remained steady as she cleaned the marble. She focused on simple things. Fold the cloth. Wipe the floor. Breathe through the humiliation. Do not give them anything else. Then she felt it. A silence spreading from the far end of the ballroom. Emily looked up before she could stop herself. King Alexander Blackwood sat beneath the carved Blackwood crest, one hand resting against the arm of his chair. He was dressed simply for a king, in black with silver at the collar, but nothing about him disappeared into the room. His dark hair was brushed away from his face, and his silver-gray eyes were fixed directly on Emily. She forgot the wet sleeve. Forgot Victoria. For one strange second, she had the unmistakable feeling that Alexander was not looking at an Omega servant. He was studying a question he could not answer. Emily lowered her gaze immediately. She waited for him to speak. He did not. Victoria turned toward him with a graceful smile, and the ballroom slowly returned to conversation. Something small inside Emily sank. She should not have expected anything. Kings did not rescue servants from embarrassment. She gathered the stained cloth and carried it toward the service corridor. Behind her, Alexander remained silent. Emily never saw his fingers tighten around the arm of his chair. She never saw the confusion pass through his normally unreadable expression, and she could not possibly have known what had happened inside him when she crossed the ballroom. For months, the restless presence of his wolf had followed him like distant thunder, never fully quiet, never completely at peace. Then Emily Carter had walked within a few feet of his chair. For the first time in months, everything inside Alexander had gone still. He watched the brown-haired Omega disappear through the service door. Then he turned slightly toward his royal secretary. The servant in gray, he said quietly. Find out who she is. Emily did not learn about the king's question. By the time she reached the servants' corridor, she was more concerned with getting the wine out of her uniform before Mrs. Bennet, the head housekeeper, saw the stain. She slipped into a narrow linen room and closed the door behind her. The noise of the ballroom softened immediately, reduced to distant music and muffled conversation through thick stone walls. Emily set the ruined cloth in a wash basin, rolled up her sleeves, and pressed cool water against the front of her dress. The red stain faded slowly. The embarrassment did not. She could still hear Victoria's laughter. Worse, she could still remember Alexander watching without saying a word. Emily shook the thought away. Expecting kindness from powerful strangers was a luxury she had stopped allowing herself years ago. She wrung out the cloth and concentrated on the work in front of her. Across the palace, however, King Alexander Blackwood was doing something unusual. He was asking about a servant. His royal secretary, Daniel Brooks, stood beside the throne with a small leather notebook tucked beneath one arm. Daniel had served Alexander for nearly 8 years and had learned that the king rarely repeated himself. "Emily Carter," Daniel said quietly after returning from a brief conversation with the household steward. Alexander kept his attention on the ballroom. Age: 22. Family: Daniel hesitated. None listed within Blackthorn territory. She entered palace service 3 years ago with references from a household outside Cedar Ridge. She works primarily in laundry and banquet preparation. Alexander's expression remained still. Omega: "Yes, Your Majesty." That should have explained something. It explained nothing. Alexander could sense Omegas. Every Alpha could. Rank had a presence, subtle but recognizable, like warmth from a fireplace before entering the room. Emily's presence had been different. Quiet. Almost hidden. Yet when she had passed within a few feet of him, the constant pressure inside his mind had vanished. His wolf had not surged toward her. It had not become restless. It had simply become peaceful. Alexander had forgotten what peace felt like. "Is something wrong?" Daniel asked carefully. Alexander glanced at him. Daniel immediately looked toward the musicians. "Nothing," Alexander said. But the answer sounded false even to him. Near the service wing, Emily changed into a clean gray dress and carried the stained uniform toward the laundry stairs. She did not notice the royal secretary watching her from the far end of the corridor. She did notice 2 beta officers walking toward her. Emily stepped aside immediately and lowered her eyes. They passed without acknowledging her. That was normal. That was safe. She continued downstairs, but a strange uneasiness followed her. Blackthorn Palace had rules that were never written down because everyone already understood them. Alphas occupied the highest offices. Betas managed the machinery of court. Omegas like Emily worked quietly around both. There were exceptions, of course, but exceptions usually belonged to wealthy families. Emily belonged to no one. She had no title, no influential relatives, and no reason to believe the king would remember her tomorrow. That was why she nearly dropped the basket when Mrs. Bennet appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "Emily." "Yes, ma'am." "Change of assignment." Mrs. Bennet handed her a folded white cloth marked with the royal crest. "The West Council Room needs fresh linens before the private meeting tonight." Emily stared at the crest. Servants from her department rarely entered the royal council wing. "Should I ask someone from the upper staff?" "They are occupied with the banquet. You know the west corridors, and you are careful." Emily accepted the cloth. "Yes, ma'am." 10 minutes later, she was walking alone through a part of the palace she usually saw only from a distance. The hallways were quieter here. Dark wood panels covered the walls, and portraits of former Blackwood rulers watched her beneath small brass lamps. Emily found the council room, replaced the linens, checked the table twice, and stepped back into the corridor. She should have returned the way she came. Instead, she heard voices behind a door that should have been empty. One belonged to Lord Marcus Whitmore. Emily stopped. "The king cannot suspect anything," Marcus said. Another man answered in a whisper. Emily could not make out every word. Then she heard too clearly. "Wolfsbane silver." Her fingers tightened around the empty linen basket. She knew enough palace lore to understand that those words did not belong in an ordinary council meeting. Emily took one cautious step backward. The floorboard beneath her shoe gave a soft creak. Silence fell behind the door. Emily stopped breathing. Then Marcus spoke again, much closer this time. "Who is out there?" Emily did not answer. For one suspended second, the west corridor seemed to hold its breath with her. The empty linen basket felt suddenly enormous in her hands, its wicker edge pressing into her palms as she stared at the closed council door. Then came the soft scrape of a chair from inside. Someone was standing. Emily moved before fear could convince her not to. She walked quickly toward the nearest corner, forcing herself not to run. Running would make noise. Running would announce guilt. She had almost reached the turn when the council door opened behind her. "You there?" Lord Marcus Whitmore's voice carried easily through the corridor. Emily stopped. Every instinct told her to keep going, but servants did not ignore royal advisors. She turned slowly and lowered her eyes. Marcus stood beneath the doorway with one hand resting against the polished frame. He was dressed for the banquet in a dark blue coat with silver buttons, every detail controlled and immaculate. Beside him stood Dr. Henry Caldwell, one of the palace physicians. Emily recognized his narrow face from the infirmary. "What are you doing in this wing?" Marcus asked. Emily lifted the basket slightly. "Changing the council linens, my lord." "At this hour?" "Mrs. Bennet assigned me." Marcus studied her long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. "And how long have you been standing outside this room?" Emily made herself breathe normally. "I was not standing outside the room, my lord. I had finished my work and was returning downstairs." Caldwell glanced toward Marcus. The movement was small, but Emily caught it. "Did you hear anything?" Marcus asked. There it was. The dangerous question. Emily remembered the words wolfsbane silver. She remembered the sentence before them. The king cannot suspect anything. She lowered her gaze another inch. "Only voices, my lord. I assumed the room was occupied." Marcus stepped into the corridor. "What voices?" "I could not understand them." Emily hated how clearly she could hear her own heartbeat. Marcus came closer, stopping several feet away. His expression remained pleasant, almost fatherly, but his eyes did not match it. "What is your name?" "Emily Carter." Something changed in Caldwell's face. Recognition, perhaps. He looked away too quickly. Marcus noticed. "Carter," he repeated. "Have we met?" "No, my lord." "Interesting." He smiled faintly. "You may go." Emily gave the smallest respectful nod she could manage and turned away. 1 step. 2. 3. She expected him to call her back. He did not. Only when she reached the servants' staircase did she allow herself to release the breath trapped in her chest. She should have gone directly to Mrs. Bennet. She should have returned to the laundry room, finished her shift, and forgotten every word she had heard. That was what a sensible Omega would do. Emily descended 2 steps. Then she stopped. Her grandmother had once told her that silence could protect the innocent, but it could also protect the guilty. Emily had been 17 when she heard those words. She had not understood them then. She understood them now. If Marcus and Caldwell were discussing something harmless, reporting it would cause nothing worse than embarrassment. If they were not, walking away could cost someone far more. She turned back. The council door was closed again. Emily waited until the corridor became silent, then moved toward the narrow service passage running behind the meeting rooms. Palace servants used it to refill water and remove dishes without disturbing council sessions. A small pantry opened halfway down the passage. Emily slipped inside. On the counter sat a silver serving tray prepared for the king's private refreshments. A crystal decanter stood beside 2 glasses. Nothing appeared unusual until Emily noticed a tiny glass vial near the folded napkins. Clear liquid. Silver stopper. No label. Her stomach tightened. Footsteps sounded beyond the pantry door. Emily reached for the vial, then stopped herself. Taking it would be noticed immediately. Instead, she picked up the tray as though she had been sent to carry it. That was when she saw something beneath the folded napkin. A heavy silver ring bearing the Blackwood royal crest. Emily frowned. Only members of the royal family were permitted to wear that seal. She lifted it carefully. A dark red stain marked one edge. Her fingertips touched it before she realized what it was. Footsteps approached. Voices followed. "The servant lied," Caldwell whispered. Marcus answered without hesitation. "Then find her before she reaches the king." Emily closed her hand around the ring, abandoned the tray, and slipped through the opposite service door. Behind her, the pantry handle began to turn. Emily slipped through the service door just as the pantry opened behind her. She did not look back. The silver ring felt impossibly heavy inside her closed fist, its carved crest pressing into her palm while she hurried through a passage barely 4 feet wide. Shelves of folded linens lined one wall. Copper pipes ran along the other, carrying heat toward the royal rooms. She knew these corridors better than most guards did. 3 years of carrying sheets, candles, towels, and breakfast trays had taught her every staircase that nobles never noticed. Tonight, that knowledge was the only advantage she had. Behind her, a door opened. "Emily." Marcus did not shout. Somehow, hearing her name spoken so calmly frightened her more. She reached the first intersection and turned left toward the kitchen stairs. Voices drifted up from below. Too many people. If Marcus accused her of stealing from the council wing, no servant would question him. Emily stopped and turned the other way. "Check the lower floor," Marcus ordered behind her. "And keep this quiet." Emily's breath caught. He did not want an alarm. He did not want the entire palace searching for her. He wanted her found without King Alexander knowing why. That realization pushed her forward. She tucked the ring into the hidden pocket inside her skirt and wiped her stained fingertips against the gray fabric. The mark only spread. She passed through a narrow archway and entered the portrait gallery. Moonlight poured through tall windows, laying pale rectangles across the floor. 50 feet ahead, 2 guards appeared at the opposite end. Emily immediately picked up a stack of abandoned napkins from a side table and lowered her head. Walk. Do not run. Servants walked. Guilty people ran. She moved toward them with measured steps. One guard barely looked at her. The second did. Stop. Emily's stomach dropped. She turned. Yes, sir. Have you seen a young servant come through here? Emily held the napkins tighter. Several servants have passed through tonight. Brown hair. Gray uniform. For half a second, neither man seemed to realize they had just described the woman standing in front of them. Emily kept her expression blank. There are 12 women in banquet service wearing gray tonight, sir. The first guard sighed. Marcus could have given us something useful. Go on, the second said. Emily nodded and continued walking. She did not breathe freely until the gallery doors closed behind her. Then she ran. Down one staircase. Across the servants' landing. Through the flower room, where buckets of white roses crowded the floor. She nearly collided with a kitchen maid carrying empty glasses. Emily, the girl asked. Are you all right? I forgot something upstairs. The lie came too quickly. Emily kept moving. The ballroom music grew louder ahead. That was good. Hundreds of guests meant witnesses. Marcus could not quietly remove her from a crowded royal gathering. She pushed through the service entrance and entered the outer edge of the ballroom. Golden light struck her eyes. Couples moved beneath the chandeliers while musicians played near the eastern wall. Emily searched for Alexander. His chair was empty. Her hope vanished. Where was he? She crossed behind a row of columns, trying to reach Daniel Brooks near the royal table, but Lord Marcus entered through another doorway. Their eyes met across the room. His pleasant expression did not change. That was the worst part. He simply turned toward 2 guards and said something Emily could not hear. Both men looked directly at her. Run. This time she obeyed the instinct. She slipped through the dancers, past a table of startled nobles, and disappeared into the west gallery. Footsteps followed. Emily knew the next corridor ended at a locked ceremonial chamber. She could not go that way. The servants' stairs were behind her. The courtyard doors were guarded. She turned back toward the ballroom and saw the massive velvet curtains hanging beside the tall western windows. There was barely enough space between the fabric and stone for one person. It was not a plan. It was desperation. Emily slipped behind the curtain and pulled the velvet closed. Darkness swallowed her. Her hand covered her mouth. The ring pressed against her hip. Footsteps entered the ballroom. Check the west gallery, Marcus ordered. Emily closed her eyes. Another set of footsteps approached from the opposite direction. Slower. Heavier. The entire room seemed to quiet around them. Emily opened her eyes as polished black boots stopped inches beyond the curtain. She knew who stood there before she heard his voice. Alexander stepped between her hiding place and the approaching guards. The velvet shifted slightly beneath his hand. Do not move, he whispered. Emily became perfectly still. Marcus approached. Your Majesty. Alexander's voice was cool. Lord Whitmore. We are looking for someone. A pause followed. Emily could hear her own heartbeat. Marcus continued. A servant may have taken something from the council wing. Alexander did not move away from the curtain. And you believe she came through here? Yes, Your Majesty. Another silence. Then Alexander asked the one question Emily had not expected. What did she take? Marcus hesitated. Emily could hear it in the silence. A fraction too long for a man who usually seemed to have an answer waiting before anyone finished asking the question. A piece of palace property, Your Majesty. Alexander remained between him and the curtain. That is not what I asked. The music had stopped completely now. Across the ballroom, conversations faded one by one until the room became so quiet that Emily could hear the soft crackle of candles. Marcus lowered his voice. A royal seal may be missing from the West Council wing. Alexander's hand rested against the curtain beside Emily's shoulder, separated from her by only a layer of velvet. Maybe missing? We are confirming the inventory. Then confirm it before turning my banquet into a search. Marcus said nothing. Emily pressed her lips together. She could picture every face in the ballroom turned toward the king. Alexander finally spoke again. Return your guards to their posts. Your Majesty, I believe the servant could still be nearby. Did I sound uncertain? Marcus answered immediately. No, your majesty. Footsteps retreated. Others followed. A few seconds later, Alexander instructed the musicians to continue. Violins rose carefully into the silence, and conversation returned in nervous waves. Emily remained frozen behind the curtain. Alexander did not move. She wondered whether he had forgotten her until his voice came quietly through the velvet. Stay there. He waited until Marcus had crossed the ballroom, then stepped behind the curtain. Emily instinctively backed toward the stone wall. Alexander seemed even taller at this distance. There was no throne between them now, no crowded ballroom, no 20 feet of polished marble. Only dim moonlight leaking through the fabric and the Alpha King standing close enough to see the fear she was trying to hide. His eyes dropped to her hand. You are bleeding. It is not mine. The answer escaped before Emily could stop it. Alexander's expression changed. That was not reassuring. Emily opened her hand. A faint dark red stain remained across 2 fingertips. I touched something. What? She hesitated. Alexander noticed. 3 guards were searching for you on Lord Whitmore's orders. You hid behind a curtain during a royal banquet. I just dismissed them without knowing whether I was protecting an innocent servant or helping someone steal from my palace. His voice stayed controlled. So let us begin again. What did you touch? Emily reached slowly into the hidden pocket of her skirt. Alexander's gaze followed her hand. She removed the silver ring and placed it on her palm. For the first time since she had seen him, the Alpha King lost his perfect stillness. His eyes fixed on the Blackwood crest. Where did you get that? The council pantry. Who gave it to you? No one. Emily swallowed. It was beneath a napkin beside a tray prepared for your private meeting. Alexander took the ring carefully. His thumb moved across the engraved wolf crest, then stopped at a tiny mark along the inside band. Something cold entered his expression. What else did you see? A small vial. Clear liquid. Silver stopper. His eyes lifted to hers. Did you touch it? No. Did you hear anything? Emily remembered Marcus standing in the corridor, asking exactly the same question. This time, she told the truth. Lord Whitmore was speaking with Dr. Caldwell. I heard him say you could not suspect anything. Then I heard the words wolfsbane silver. Alexander went completely still. Emily wished he would react. Anger would have been easier to understand than silence. I know I should have reported it immediately, she continued. I did not know who I could trust. You made the correct decision. Emily stared at him. I did. If Whitmore is involved, reporting it through ordinary palace channels could have sent the information directly back to him. Alexander looked at the ring again. And this is not simply a royal seal. Emily waited. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It belonged to my older brother. Belonged. Alexander looked through the narrow opening in the curtain toward the ballroom. Nathan Blackwood disappeared 11 years ago. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. I thought Prince Nathan died. So did everyone. Alexander closed his fingers around the ring. Including me. Voices approached outside. Alexander raised one finger, and Emily immediately fell silent. Marcus passed within several feet of their hiding place, speaking quietly with another official. Alexander waited until the voices disappeared. Then he turned back to her. From this moment forward, you do not return to the servants' quarters alone. You do not speak to Whitmore. You do not speak to Caldwell. You tell no one what you heard tonight. Emily's pulse quickened. What am I supposed to tell Mrs. Bennet? Alexander considered her for a moment. Nothing. She will notice if I disappear from my duties. You are not disappearing. Something almost unreadable passed through his silver gray eyes. Your assignment is changing. Emily frowned. To what? Alexander slipped his brother's ring into his coat and pulled the curtain aside just enough to look toward the royal table. Then he glanced back at the Omega who had been invisible to his court only hours earlier. Starting tonight, Emily Carter, you work for me. By sunrise, half of Blackthorn Palace knew Emily Carter had been reassigned to the Alpha King. By breakfast, the other half had invented reasons why. Emily heard the whispers before she even reached the royal wing. That is her. The Omega from last night. Why would the king choose a laundry servant? She kept walking. Mrs. Bennet had delivered the reassignment with an expression caught somewhere between confusion and concern, but the written order carried Alexander's seal. No one questioned it. Emily now wore the same plain gray dress, carried the same modest key ring, and owned exactly the same possessions she had owned yesterday. Yet the palace looked at her differently. That frightened her more than being ignored ever had. Daniel Brooks met her outside Alexander's private study. "Your duties are simple," he said. "You will deliver meals and correspondence, maintain the adjoining rooms, and remain within the royal wing unless His Majesty instructs otherwise." Emily understood what he did not say. "Stay where Alexander can protect you." "Does Lord Whitmore know?" Daniel's expression remained carefully neutral. "Lord Whitmore knows that His Majesty requested a new personal attendant." "And does he believe that?" "Lord Whitmore rarely believes anything convenient." The study door opened. Alexander stood inside beside a broad desk covered with maps and sealed letters. Morning light sharpened the tired lines around his eyes. "Come in, Emily." Hearing her name from him still felt strange. She entered. Daniel closed the door behind her. Alexander placed Nathan's ring on the desk. It had been cleaned, revealing a small crescent carved inside the band. "My brother had this mark added when he was 16, Alexander said. "Only my family knew about it. The ring is genuine." Emily looked at the silver crest. "Then Prince Nathan could still be alive. Or someone wants me to believe he is." Alexander studied a map instead of her. "Either possibility is dangerous." A knock interrupted them. Daniel returned carrying a sealed note. Alexander read it once. His expression hardened. "The vial is gone." Emily's stomach tightened. "From the pantry?" Daniel nodded. "The entire tray was removed before dawn. Dr. Caldwell claims he knows nothing about it." "Of course he does," Alexander said. Emily stared at the ring. "Then this is all we have." "No," Alexander looked at her. "We have you." The words did not sound comforting. Emily gave a nervous breath. "That is not much evidence." "It is enough to make Whitmore nervous." Before she could answer, voices rose outside the study. A woman spoke sharply, followed by Daniel's restrained protest. The door opened anyway. Lady Victoria Ashford entered wearing pale blue silk, her mother and two noblewomen behind her. Victoria's gaze found Emily immediately. "So the rumors are true." Alexander did not rise. "Good morning, Victoria." She ignored the warning in his tone. "This servant was cleaning floors yesterday. Today she is standing in your private study." Emily lowered her eyes. Victoria stepped closer. "What exactly did you do to earn such an honor?" "Lady Victoria," Alexander said. 2 words. Nothing more. Victoria stopped, but embarrassment had already sharpened her expression. "I only meant that court positions should belong to people qualified for them." Emily could have remained silent. That was what the old Emily would have done. But the ring on Alexander's desk reminded her that silence had already become dangerous. "Then I hope to become qualified quickly, my lady." Victoria stared at her. One noblewoman covered a surprised smile. "You forget your place," Victoria said. Emily felt heat climb into her cheeks. Before she could apologize, Alexander stood. The room changed instantly. He walked around the desk and stopped beside Emily, not in front of her, not behind her. Beside her. "No," he said calmly. "You have forgotten mine." Victoria's face lost color. Alexander continued. "Emily Carter serves by my order. Questioning her appointment means questioning my judgment." Silence filled the study. Victoria lowered her head. "Forgive me, Your Majesty." "Granted." Alexander turned toward Daniel. "Escort our guests back to the East Wing." When the door finally closed, Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes, I did." Alexander returned to the desk. "Whitmore will watch how I treat you. If he believes you are unprotected, he will approach you." Emily understood immediately. "You want him to think I might know something. He already thinks that." Alexander picked up Nathan's ring. "What I want is for him to make a mistake." A quiet knock came from the side entrance. An elderly palace archivist stepped inside carrying a leather ledger. He bowed and placed it before Alexander. "Your Majesty, I found the record you requested." Alexander opened the book. His eyes moved down the page, then stopped. Emily watched the color drain from his expression. "What is it?" Alexander turned the ledger toward her. A single entry had been marked 11 years earlier, on the night Nathan disappeared. The authorization for Nathan's carriage to leave Blackthorn Palace bore the signature of one man. Marcus Whitmore. Alexander read the signature twice. Emily watched his face become unreadable again, but she had already seen the first reaction, the brief fracture in his composure before years of discipline closed over it. 11 years was a long time to believe someone was gone. It was even longer to discover that a trusted advisor might have known more than he admitted. Could the signature have been forged? Emily asked. The archivist adjusted his glasses. Possible, Your Majesty, but unlikely. Lord Whitmore was master of royal transit at the time. He personally authorized departures after sunset. Alexander closed the ledger. No one learns about this. The archivist bowed. Of course. Daniel escorted him out, leaving Emily alone with the king. Morning sunlight stretched across the desk, touching Nathan's ring without warming it. Alexander picked it up. Nathan was 24 when he disappeared. I was 21. His voice was quieter now. We argued that night. Emily did not ask why. Something in his expression told her the memory had lived long enough without strangers pulling at it. By morning, his carriage had been found abandoned outside the northern boundary. Everyone assumed he had left voluntarily and met with trouble beyond our territory. And Lord Whitmore signed the order allowing him to leave. Yes. Alexander slipped the ring into his pocket, which means Whitmore was either doing his job or helping create the story we believed for 11 years. A knock sounded. Daniel returned. Your Majesty, the council is assembling for the noon session. Alexander glanced toward Emily. You are coming. She blinked. Into the council chamber? You will serve water. Emily understood. He wanted Whitmore to see her near him. The thought made her stomach tighten. 20 minutes later, she entered the council chamber carrying a silver pitcher. 12 officials sat around the long blackwood table. Marcus occupied the chair nearest Alexander's right. Dr. Caldwell stood near the windows with a leather case. Both men looked at Emily. Marcus smiled. A promotion already, Miss Carter? Emily poured water into the first glass. I serve where I am assigned, my lord. Apparently. She moved around the table, feeling his attention follow her. When she reached Alexander, he did not look up from the documents before him. Stay close, he said quietly. 3 simple words. Still, every person nearby heard them. Marcus's smile disappeared. The meeting began. Trade routes, winter grain reserves, border patrols. Emily listened without appearing to listen. Marcus spoke normally, calmly, as if he had not ordered guards to search for her hours earlier. That frightened her more than open hostility would have. Halfway through the meeting, Victoria entered with her mother to deliver invitations for the moon harvest ceremony. Her eyes immediately found Emily standing behind Alexander's chair. Your Majesty, Victoria said, surely a royal attendant should understand that council meetings are not a place for household servants. Alexander continued reading. Emily is here because I requested her. Victoria's gaze hardened. People are beginning to talk. People generally do when they have insufficient work. Several council members lowered their eyes to hide their reactions. Victoria's cheeks reddened. She turned toward Emily. Perhaps she enjoys the attention. Emily's fingers tightened around the pitcher. She could feel every eye in the chamber. Yesterday, she would have apologized simply to end the moment. Today, she remembered Marcus's signature. The missing vial. Nathan's ring. There were larger things in this palace than her embarrassment. I would prefer not to have any attention at all, my lady, Emily said softly. Then perhaps you should remember where you belong. Victoria reached toward the pitcher. Her hand caught its handle, and water spilled across the edge of the table and onto Emily's sleeve. The room fell silent. Victoria released the pitcher. How unfortunate. Emily looked at the water darkening the same sleeve wine had stained the night before. Something inside her became strangely calm. Before she could reach for a cloth, Alexander stood. He took the pitcher from Emily's hand and set it on the table. Her place, he said, his voice quiet enough to make everyone listen harder, is wherever I say it is. Victoria stared at him. Alexander's silver-gray eyes moved across the council chamber. If anyone has difficulty understanding that, they may discuss it with me. No one spoke. Emily felt the strange weight of being defended in a room where she had once believed she should barely exist. Then Marcus leaned back in his chair. He was no longer watching Alexander. He was watching her, and for the first time, Emily saw something beneath his polished calm. Concern. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As the council members filed out, Marcus paused beside Emily. Enjoy the king's protection while you have it, Miss Carter. His tone was perfectly courteous. Emily met his eyes. Is that advice, my lord? Experience. He walked away. Alexander appeared beside her moments later. What did he say? Emily repeated it. Alexander watched Marcus disappear through the doors. Good. Emily frowned. That did not sound good. It means he is worried. Alexander turned toward Daniel. Double the guard at the royal wing and quietly inspect every passage beneath the west tower. Daniel nodded. What are we looking for? Alexander touched Nathan's ring through his coat. A reason my brother's seal returned after 11 years. Before Daniel could answer, a young messenger hurried into the chamber carrying a folded note. Your Majesty, this was found beneath the west tower door. Alexander opened it. Only 6 words were written inside. Nathan Blackwood is still alive. The 6 words seemed to silence the room more completely than any royal command. Nathan Blackwood is still alive. Emily watched Alexander read the note again, his silver-gray eyes moving slowly across the handwriting as though the letters might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. Daniel stepped closer. Is there anything else? Alexander turned the paper over. Blank. Where exactly was this found? The young messenger swallowed. Under the west tower door, Your Majesty. A guard noticed it less than 10 minutes ago. Alexander folded the note once. Who has access to that corridor? Royal guards, maintenance staff, and senior household servants. Which means half the palace could have placed it there, Daniel said. Alexander looked toward the council doors Marcus had passed through moments earlier. Or someone wants us to think so. Emily remained quiet until Alexander turned toward her. You saw the ring before anyone knew he had it. Look at this. He handed her the note. Emily studied the handwriting. The letters were narrow and unusually upright. Nothing seemed familiar. Then she noticed the paper. This is not ordinary stationery. Daniel frowned. How can you tell? Emily rubbed the edge between her fingers. The laundry handles paper wrappers from every department. Most palace stationery is smooth. This has tiny fibers in it. Alexander looked closer. Cotton. And lavender, Emily said. She lifted the page slightly. Very faint. Daniel understood first. The old guest wing. Emily nodded. The closets there are lined with lavender sachets because the rooms stay closed most of the year. Alexander was already moving. Show me. The west guest wing had been in use since spring. Dust softened the dark floorboards, and white covers draped the furniture like quiet ghosts. Emily led Alexander and Daniel through a narrow service passage toward the old tower stairs. 2 royal guards followed several feet behind. She knew the route because she had once spent an entire winter carrying fresh linens to rooms no one occupied. There is another entrance below, she said. The main stairs end at the storage level, but servants used a lower passage years ago. Daniel glanced at her. Where does it lead? Under the west garden. Alexander stopped. Under the palace? Yes. Emily pointed toward a wooden panel almost invisible beside a linen cabinet. But it was sealed before I started working here. Alexander pulled the panel open. It was not sealed anymore. Cool air moved through the opening, carrying the scent of damp stone. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Daniel called for lanterns. Alexander took the first one. You stay here, Emily. She looked at him. I know these passages better than your guards. That is precisely why I need you somewhere safe. If there is another exit, you might walk past it without knowing. Alexander's jaw tightened. Emily expected an order. Instead, after a moment, he handed her the second lantern. Stay close to me. They descended. The tunnel was barely 6 feet wide, its stone walls rough with age. Their footsteps echoed softly. Emily kept her lantern raised while Alexander examined every doorway. They had gone perhaps 200 feet when she noticed something strange. Wait. Alexander stopped immediately. Emily pointed toward the floor. A thin line of clean stone crossed the dust. Something heavy was moved through here recently. Daniel crouched to examine it. A cart. Maybe. Alexander followed the marks toward an old iron door. It stood slightly open. He raised one hand, signaling everyone to remain behind him, then pushed it wider. The chamber beyond was empty. A wooden table stood against one wall. Several sealed crates occupied another. Emily entered carefully. The air smelled faintly of herbs. On the table sat a crystal decanter identical to the one she had seen in the council pantry. Beside it lay a silver-stoppered vial. Emily's pulse quickened. That is it. Alexander did not touch the vial. Daniel examined the crates. Medical supplies. From Caldwell. Alexander asked. The Royal Infirmary seal is on every box. Emily turned toward a small desk in the corner. Papers had been removed, but one object remained beneath the chair. A photograph. She picked it up carefully. Two young men stood beside a lake, both smiling at the camera. One was unmistakably Alexander, perhaps 20 years old. The other had the same dark hair and blackwood eyes. Alexander took the photograph from her. His expression softened for a heartbeat. Nathan. A sound echoed somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Everyone turned. Not footsteps. A door closing. Alexander handed the photograph to Daniel and moved toward the far passage. Someone was here. They followed the corridor another 100 feet until it divided. Emily raised her lantern. Left leads toward the garden. Alexander looked right. And that way? I do not know. A faint draft touched Emily's face from the darkness. Then a familiar scent reached her. Lavender. She turned right. Emily. Alexander followed immediately. The passage ended at a small wooden door. Light showed beneath it. Alexander reached for the handle. Before he touched it, the door opened from the other side. A man stood there wearing a simple dark coat, his face older and thinner than the photograph, but unmistakably similar. Alexander stopped breathing. The stranger stared at him with the same silver-gray eyes. You should not have come down here, he whispered. Alexander's lantern trembled once in his hand. Nathan. For several seconds, no one moved. Emily stood between the cold stone walls with her lantern held at chest height, watching two brothers stare at each other across 11 missing years. Nathan Blackwood looked nothing like the vanished prince described in palace portraits. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples, his face leaner, his simple coat worn from years far removed from royal life. Yet the resemblance to Alexander was undeniable. The same straight posture, the same silver-gray eyes, the same habit of becoming perfectly still when emotion threatened to show. Alexander finally spoke. Where have you been? Nathan glanced toward the guards behind him. Not here. You disappeared 11 years ago. And if you want the truth about why, we need to leave this tunnel before Whitmore realizes you've found me. Alexander's expression hardened. Marcus knows you are alive. Marcus is the reason everyone believed I was dead. The words landed softly, but Emily felt their weight. Daniel stepped forward. Then explained the carriage authorization. Nathan gave a humorless smile. That was the beginning. He opened the door wider and led them into a forgotten storage room connected to an old garden house. Papers covered a small table. Maps of Blackthorn Palace had been marked with circles around service entrances, council offices, and the royal infirmary. Emily recognized Caldwell's name written beside several dates. Nathan noticed her staring. You are Emily Carter. Her fingers tightened around the lantern. How do you know my name? Because Marcus has been asking about you since last night. Alexander immediately stepped closer to Emily. Nathan noticed that too, but said nothing. Instead, he pulled a leather folder from beneath the maps. Whitmore has spent years building influence inside the court. Appointments, trade agreements, medical access, guard assignments, small things individually. Together, they give him control over almost every route leading to the throne. Alexander opened the folder. Why did you never contact me? Nathan looked at his younger brother for a long moment. I tried. He pointed towards several sealed letters. 3 messages in the first year. 2 in the second. None reached you. Then I learned the people carrying them were being questioned before they reached Blackthorn territory. I stopped risking anyone else. Alexander's face tightened. You could have returned yourself. And appeared at the palace gates claiming your most trusted advisor had built a conspiracy? 11 years ago, Marcus had witnesses, records, and half the council convinced I had abandoned my responsibilities. I had suspicion, nothing more. And now, Nathan looked toward Emily. Now Marcus is frightened enough to make mistakes. Emily thought of the missing vial. Wolfsbane's silver. Nathan nodded. It does not need to harm the king directly to serve Marcus's plan. Small exposure can create symptoms that resemble instability in an alpha. Confusion, agitation, loss of control. Marcus wants the council to believe Alexander is becoming unfit to rule. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Then the council removes me. Temporarily, Nathan said. Long enough for a regent to assume authority. Daniel understood. Marcus. Not publicly. He would place someone acceptable in front of the court and control decisions from behind them. Emily remembered Victoria's confidence, her constant presence near royal ceremonies, her expectation that she belonged beside the throne. Lady Victoria. Nathan looked at her. Exactly. Alexander closed the folder. Does Victoria know? I do not believe so. She wants status. Marcus wants access. A faint sound traveled through the tunnel behind them. Nathan's head turned. We have to move. Daniel looked toward the passage. Our guards are there. That is not what worries me. Nathan crossed to another door. Marcus has watchers throughout the lower palace. If Alexander entered these tunnels, someone has already reported it. Emily followed as they moved toward the garden passage. Halfway there, Alexander suddenly stopped. His hand pressed against the stone wall. Emily noticed the change immediately. His breathing had become uneven. Alexander. Daniel stepped toward him. Your Majesty? Alexander shook his head as though trying to clear it. Something is wrong. Nathan's gaze dropped to the king's coat. Did you drink anything at the council meeting? Water. Emily remembered the pitcher. Victoria had touched it. Caldwell had been in the room. The realization chilled her. Alexander closed his eyes, fighting for control as the restless presence of his wolf seemed to rise beneath his calm. Daniel reached for him, but Nathan stopped him. Give him space. Alexander's breathing grew sharper. Emily should have stepped back with everyone else. Instead, she remembered the strange stillness she had seen in his face when he first looked at her. She moved closer. Emily, Alexander warned quietly. Stay back. She did not. She lifted her hand slowly and rested it against his sleeve. Nothing happened. Then she placed her palm gently against his cheek. Alexander opened his eyes. The silver in them seemed almost luminous in the lantern light. Emily felt warmth beneath her hand, then something deeper, a quiet pull she could not name. His breathing slowed. The tension left his shoulders. The tunnel became completely silent. Nathan stared at them. Alexander, he whispered. The king did not look away from Emily. What? Nathan's expression changed from concern to astonishment. Your wolf. Alexander remained motionless beneath Emily's touch. Nathan spoke even more softly. It knows her. Emily pulled her hand away as if the words themselves had startled her. The warmth of Alexander's skin remained in her palm. He straightened slowly, his breathing steady again, but his eyes stayed on her with an intensity that made the narrow tunnel feel even smaller. What do you mean it knows her? Emily asked. Nathan looked between them. I mean Alexander's wolf was fighting whatever affected him, and the moment you touched him, it stopped. That could be coincidence. Emily wanted the explanation to sound convincing. It did not. Nathan gave her a thoughtful look. Perhaps. Alexander turned toward his brother. This discussion waits. His voice had recovered its usual control. Marcus already has too much time. They returned through the garden passage and entered the palace by a service door known only to senior household staff. Daniel quietly separated from them to secure Nathan somewhere safe. Alexander insisted on returning to the council chamber before rumors could spread. Emily followed, still trying not to think about what had happened underground. Her touch had calmed him. She had felt it. Not power exactly. Recognition. Something inside her had answered something inside him, and she did not have a name for it. They had barely reached the main gallery when palace bells sounded 3 times. Alexander stopped. Council summons, he said. Daniel appeared at the far doorway, moving quickly toward them. Your Majesty, Lord Whitmore has called an emergency session. On whose authority? He claims there has been a security breach involving restricted substances and stolen royal property. Emily understood before Daniel finished. Me. Alexander's expression went cold. Stay beside me. The council chamber was already crowded when they arrived. Marcus stood near the center table with Dr. Caldwell beside him. Victoria and her mother occupied seats near the eastern wall. Several senior alphas whispered among themselves until Alexander entered. Then everyone rose. Marcus bowed. Your Majesty, forgive the urgency, but evidence has been discovered that cannot be ignored. Alexander took his seat. Emily remained several feet behind him. Then present it. Caldwell placed a small silver-stoppered vial on the table. Emily's stomach tightened. This was found in a servant's locker less than 20 minutes ago, Marcus said. Which servant? Alexander asked, although everyone in the room seemed to know. Marcus turned toward Emily. Miss Carter. A murmur moved through the chamber. Emily felt dozens of eyes settle on her. Yesterday, she would have wished for a wall to disappear behind. Today, she simply stood still. That vial was in the West Council pantry, she said. Caldwell shook his head. I have never seen it there. Emily looked directly at him. You were standing beside Lord Whitmore when I heard the words Wolfsbane Silver. Silence. Marcus sighed as if disappointed in her. A serious accusation from someone discovered near restricted rooms, carrying property belonging to the royal family. Emily's pulse jumped. He knew about the ring. Alexander did not react. What property? Marcus asked. Perhaps Miss Carter would like to explain. Emily looked at Alexander. His expression gave her no answer, only calm. Trust yourself. She stepped forward. Marcus smiled faintly. There is no need to be frightened. Emily almost laughed at that. Instead, she looked around the chamber. These were the people she had spent years avoiding. Alphas, nobles, advisors, people whose titles had once made her lower her eyes before they even spoke. She realized something simple. Hiding had not kept her safe. It had only made her easier to ignore. I am not frightened of telling the truth, she said. Marcus's smile weakened. Emily continued. I found a royal ring beside the vial. Lord Whitmore ordered guards to find me before I could speak to the king. The ring belonged to Prince Nathan Blackwood. The chamber erupted in whispers. Marcus raised his voice. Prince Nathan is dead. No, Emily said. One word, clear and steady. Marcus stared at her. Emily took another step into the center of the room. He is alive. Even Alexander's council seemed to forget how to breathe. Marcus recovered first. An extraordinary claim. Convenient, too. Where is this supposedly living prince? A door opened behind the council. Daniel Brooks entered. He stepped aside. Nathan Blackwood walked into the room. Victoria rose so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. Caldwell went pale. Marcus did neither. He simply stared. Nathan crossed the chamber and stopped beside Emily. Hello, Marcus. For the first time, Lord Whitmore's perfect composure cracked. That is impossible. Nathan reached into his coat and placed a bundle of sealed records on the council table. 11 years of lies tend to make the truth seem impossible. Marcus looked toward the guards. Take them both into custody until this can be investigated. No one moved. His voice sharpened. That is an order. Still no one moved. Alexander rose from his chair. You seem confused, Marcus. He descended the steps from the royal seat and stopped beside Emily. There is only one person in this room who gives orders in my name. Marcus looked at Alexander as though he were seeing the king for the first time. Around them, the council chamber had gone silent. Emily could hear the soft ticking of the brass clock above the eastern doors. Alexander stood beside her, close enough that his presence felt steady rather than overwhelming. Marcus slowly lowered his hand. Your Majesty, I am trying to protect the crown. Then you have chosen a strange way to demonstrate it. Alexander turned toward Nathan. Show them. Nathan opened the bundle of records and spread several documents across the council table. These are copies of transportation orders, private payments, infirmary transfers, and council appointments made through Whitmore's office over the last 11 years. Daniel distributed the pages among the senior council members. Nathan continued. Individually, they appear ordinary. Together, they show a pattern. Marcus placed loyal people in positions controlling palace access, royal correspondence, and medical supplies. Caldwell stepped backward. I was following administrative instructions. Marcus turned sharply toward him. Be quiet. The command came too quickly. Several council members exchanged glances. Emily saw the moment Marcus realized his mistake. Alexander saw it too. Dr. Caldwell, Alexander said. Did Lord Whitmore instruct you to obtain Wolfsbane silver? Caldwell looked from Marcus to the king. His confidence disappeared. I was told it was required for controlled medical research. And the vial found in Emily Carter's locker? Caldwell swallowed. I did not place it there. Marcus's face tightened. Think carefully before answering. Alexander stepped forward. No, he should answer without your help. Caldwell lowered his eyes. Lord Whitmore ordered a member of the household staff to place it there. A murmur swept through the chamber. Victoria stared at Marcus. You told me she was manipulating the king. Marcus did not answer. Victoria's voice became quieter. You used me. Emily looked at the woman who had humiliated her twice. Victoria suddenly seemed less powerful than she had the night before. Not innocent, but no longer untouchable. Alexander turned to the royal guards. Lord Whitmore and Dr. Caldwell are to remain under palace supervision until the council completes a formal investigation. They are not to contact witnesses or access official records. The guard stepped forward. No weapons were drawn. None were needed. Marcus looked at Emily. All this because a servant happened to hear a conversation. Emily met his gaze. No, because you believed a servant would never matter. Something changed in the room. It was not loud. No one applauded. Yet Emily felt it in the way the council members looked at her now. Marcus had depended on invisibility, not his own, but hers. He had assumed an Omega carrying linens could hear the truth and still be treated as though she had heard nothing. The guards escorted Marcus and Caldwell from the chamber. When the doors closed, Alexander turned toward the council. There is another matter. Emily glanced at him. She had expected relief. Instead, his expression carried the same controlled intensity she had seen behind the curtain. For years, he said, this court has confused rank with worth. Last night, while people in this palace were occupied with titles and appearances, Emily Carter noticed what everyone else overlooked. She protected information that could affect this kingdom, preserved evidence connected to my brother, and spoke when silence would have been safer. Emily felt heat rise into her face as every gaze turned toward her. Alexander continued. Some of you laughed when she was humiliated. Others watched. I was among those who watched. Emily looked at him sharply. The admission seemed to surprise the council as much as it surprised her. That was my failure, Alexander said. Not hers. He descended the final step until he stood directly before Emily. She instinctively prepared to lower her head. Alexander moved first. The Alpha King bowed to her. Not deeply, not theatrically, just enough that no one could misunderstand. Emily forgot how to breathe. Around them, nobles who had barely noticed her yesterday stared in absolute silence. Alexander raised his head. Thank you, Emily Carter. Her throat tightened. Your Majesty, I only did what seemed right. That is precisely why it matters. Nathan smiled faintly from beside the council table. Victoria lowered her eyes. Then, one by one, the senior council members followed their king's example and inclined their heads toward Emily. She had spent 3 years becoming invisible in these halls. Now the most powerful people in the kingdom were acknowledging her by name. Emily looked at Alexander. His silver-gray eyes had softened, but there was something else there too. Something she remembered from the tunnel when her touch had quieted the storm inside him. She felt the same strange pull again. Alexander seemed to feel it as well. His wolf stirred, not with anger, but recognition. Nathan noticed. His expression became knowing. Alexander ignored him. The council is dismissed. Chairs moved. Voices returned. Emily waited until the chamber had nearly emptied before turning toward Alexander. What happens to me now? He looked at her for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted toward the tall western windows, where moonlight would rise in only a few hours. For the first time since you entered this palace, he said quietly, that decision belongs to you. By evening, Blackthorn Palace felt like a place Emily had never seen before. Nothing about the stone walls had changed. The same chandeliers glowed above the corridors. The same servants carried trays between rooms. The same autumn wind whispered against the tall windows. Yet people looked at her now. Some offered respectful nods. Others stepped aside when she passed. Emily was not sure which felt stranger, being noticed or realizing she no longer needed to disappear. She found herself returning to the ballroom after sunset. Most of the banquet decorations had been removed, leaving the enormous room quiet beneath silver moonlight. At the western windows, the velvet curtains hung exactly where they had the night before. Emily touched the edge of one and remembered pressing herself against the cold stone behind it, convinced that being invisible was the only thing keeping her safe. I wondered if I would find you here. Alexander's voice came from behind her. Emily turned. He had removed his formal royal coat and wore a simple black shirt beneath a dark jacket. Without the council surrounding him, he looked less like the distant Alpha King from the throne and more like the man who had stood between her and danger without knowing whether she deserved his trust. How is Prince Nathan? She asked, annoyed that everyone keeps calling him Prince Nathan. A small smile touched Alexander's face. So I suppose he is recovering quickly. Emily smiled too. And Lord Whitmore. The investigation begins tomorrow. Nathan's records have already confirmed enough to remove Marcus from authority permanently. Caldwell has agreed to cooperate with the council. Alexander stopped several feet from her. He did not close the distance until she chose to face him fully. Emily appreciated that more than she expected. Then it is over. That part is. The quiet answer made her heart beat a little faster. Alexander looked toward the moonlit windows. There is something else we should discuss. Emily already knew. She had felt the question following them since the tunnel. Your wolf. Alexander nodded. For months, I thought something inside me was failing. My wolf was restless every hour of every day. Then you walked into the ballroom. Emily remembered his stare from across the room. And it became quiet. Completely. His eyes met hers. When you touched me in the tunnel, I understood why. Emily swallowed. Nathan thinks your wolf recognized me. Nathan is rarely subtle. That almost made her laugh. Alexander's expression softened. Among our kind, there is an old word for what he believes this is. A bond that cannot be commanded by rank or arranged by a council. Emily knew the word before he said it. Mate. Yes. The ballroom seemed suddenly enormous around them. Emily looked toward the curtain. Yesterday, that word might have frightened her. A king could make a declaration, and an Omega without family or status might be expected to accept it gratefully. Alexander seemed to understand the thought before she voiced it. I am not claiming anything from you. Emily looked back at him. But if the bond is real, then it will still be real tomorrow. His answer came without hesitation. And next month, and next year, destiny may tell me who you are to my wolf. It does not tell you what you owe me. Something inside Emily loosened. All her life, other people had explained where she belonged, which doorway she should use, where she should stand, when she should lower her eyes. Even kindness had sometimes arrived with expectations attached. Alexander offered none. What if I do not know what I want? She asked. Then you take time until you do. In my position, your work in the royal wing is yours if you want it. Another position is yours if you prefer. If you want to leave Blackthorn entirely, I will arrange whatever you need. Emily studied him. You would let your possible mate leave? Alexander gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. I would dislike it considerably. For the first time, she saw warmth break fully through the king's restraint. But yes. Emily turned toward the windows. Beyond them, the palace gardens stretched beneath the moon, their paths silver between dark trees. She thought about the girl who had arrived 3 years earlier with one suitcase and a belief that survival meant taking up as little space as possible. She was still that girl, but she was not only that girl anymore. I think I want to see the garden, she said. Alexander glanced toward the doors. Now. He offered his hand, then stopped before touching her. The choice remained hers. Emily looked at his open palm. Slowly, she placed her hand in it. No thunder, no grand declaration, only warmth. Alexander's wolf stirred somewhere beneath the silence, and Emily felt that mysterious answering pull inside herself again. This time, she did not fear it. They walked toward the doors together. At the threshold, Emily glanced back once at the velvet curtain. Alexander followed her gaze. Yesterday, I told you not to move, he said. Emily looked at him. A faint smile touched his face. Tonight, move wherever you choose, Emily. And if you will allow me, I will walk beside you. She stepped into the moonlight. Alexander walked beside her, not ahead of her, and for once Emily Carter did not lower her eyes. Thank you so much for watching this story with us. If Emily's journey touched your heart, tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what moment you loved most. Please like and share this video with someone who believes kindness and courage still matter, and subscribe to support the channel and join us for more stories of love, destiny, and second chances.